Dan, welcome to the show, man.
Justin, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this conversation with you because I was like, I was spilling too much before we hit record. I'm like, let me just hit record and get into this, and then we'll go from there. Obviously, one of your products, you work with a company called Qualia, and one of your products, my wife and I have been using for a little
Yep.
over a year, called Senolytics. And it's the reality of I'm now 41. She's 5 years older than me. And it's the
Yep.
discussion of like, we're getting older. We've built a great life for ourselves. How do we sustain our health? How do we continue to be youthfully on the inside so we can continue to age gracefully? And
Yep.
your company nails it on all fronts. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But why don't we start with who is Dan today? And then we'll break down how you got there.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to make a quick comment about what you just said. And it's something that I think about and have spoken about publicly, how we're very different people as we enter into different decades of life. And our needs, motivations, interests change. And so you have to think about what's going to resonate with a particular person in their window of time. And so, you talk to a 13-year-old about longevity, whatever, they're not going to be interested in it. But right around this time, when you might see friends and you, even in yourself, some signs of aging, and it becomes a motivating factor. Health span. How do I improve my level of health? How do I extend a higher level of health deeper into the lifespan? And I think, and what I'm really excited about as somebody who is an advocate in scientific wellness and health is that some things sound really good and people can head nod to them like, yeah, that's really important, but they don't take action on them. People take action on health span. They want to extend it, elongate it, heighten it, however you want to think about it. So just wanted to make a comment on that. But to answer your question, I think I am fundamentally a health communicator that, a friend of mine, we used to say, scientists do experiments. They're in the lab running studies. And while I've done that in the past, looking at diet and cancer, looking at creatine, the first study I ever took part of was looking at creatine back in the 90s. Um, and then sleep research. So lots of things that I have done research on. But now, fundamentally, I'm most interested in translating complex science into whether it's a analogy or breaking down the complexity so that people really understand it. Because the big, I think, healthcare, I would say, perspective is that before, when you could outsource your health to a doctor, like this idea that don't worry about your health, you have an expert that's going to take care of you. That really only applies to sick care. So, disease management, trying to diagnose if there's a particular issue. You want your doctor to be as smart as possible, and you want them to be able to figure out what your situation is. On the self care side, it's totally different. On the self-care side, it's about embedding people with knowledge so that they change their pattern of living within their waking period of life. And you need to have skills in order to do that. So anybody who's listening to this show now, you're doing the right thing, right? You are required in your own health journey. And that doesn't mean that you're going to not use really skilled doctors along your path, but you need both, right? You need really good people that are supporting you, and you also need to be involved, learning, trying things, building skills. And the cool thing is, every time you develop any type of a skill, you can exploit that knowledge for the rest of your life. So that's that, even though it's complex and it can seem overwhelming, it's a slow process. And so keep tuning in.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, like you said, when you by the time you get to the doctor, sometimes it's too late, right? Like, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm anti-pharmaceutical only from the standpoint of my mom had a 20-year opioid addiction that ultimately took her life, and so I'm like, how can I
Oh,
ever avoid getting to a place where I need to, you know, put a drug into my body that helps me be pain free, helps me do all these things, and how can I avoid that for as long as possible, right?
yeah.
And so, like, I think that's an interesting conversation. Now, why do you think that the topic of longevity is becoming more and more popular? Because 15, 10, even 10 years ago, you didn't really see it. Now all the billionaires in the world are talking about it. Stem cells are popping up all over the place. I got offered to fly down to Costa Rica and do it, and then I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Like all these
Mm.
weird things, right? And so why do you think it's such a hot topic now compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
Yeah. Because we've made legitimate scientific advancements. So the interest in longevity is as old as the human race. We've always, I think that taking care of your health is a fundamental part of self-preservation, obviously, and that uh, all of us care about it more than sometimes it seems. I think a lot of people have cared, and if you're ever looking at somebody that seems like they don't care, they might just feel flabbergasted, like they've tried really hard in the past and they didn't get any results, and so. But I think fundamentally we do care about taking care of our body. It's part of being alive. It's part of survival. Part of that is then saying, all right, how do we live longer? And, there's two conversations that are happening right now, and they're kind of interrelated. One of them is, how do I live longer? And the other one is, how do I improve my health for the time that I do have on Earth so that I can have more youthful functioning in the time I'm given?
Yeah.
And it's some interesting research on this. Things that extend longevity might also come at a consequence of lowering your health level, which is a little bit weird. And it's going into this like preservation mode, and your immune system is suppressed and your vitality is suppressed. And some people might want to make that trade-off. Other people are actually the opposite. They're like, you know what? If I live to 85 and then that's my time, okay, but I want to be as healthy as I can in those years that I have. And, I don't think that there's any moralizing on which one's right or wrong. Everybody gets to choose what feels right for them. But that is an interesting conversation that's being had right now.
Yeah. I mean, is it a one or the other type of conversation?
Well, that's where that intermixing that I mentioned comes into play, right? So some of longevity is ending premature mortality due to low health, right?
Mm.
You're not letting yourself die younger because you had a heart or a cardiovascular system that gave out, or you had a liver, that was because what's interesting is that your organs can age at different rates. And there's some thinking that the organ that is aging fastest is the one that is going to sort of drive how fast you are actually aging, right? So you can
Interesting.
imagine somebody, and we see this in different types of platforms like Generation Labs or True Diagnostics. Even Elysium has something called Index, where they're giving you organ system ages. And you can see that a couple of your organ systems might be younger than your chronological age in terms of how they appear. And the opposite could be true for a whole set of other organs as well. And so, yeah, so getting that type of resolution into your health is a really exciting area because then you might be able to do more targeted therapies on, whatever your body in particular needs.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so as we kind of look at this, like I'm in the camp of like, okay, if I make it to 85, I want a healthy 85, right? I
Yeah,
semi have genetics, and what we can talk about that too, the importance of genetics. Some genetics on my side. My great grandmother lived to be 97. My grandmother just passed away recently, earlier this year at 96. And lived
mm,
a really, really good life and was still driving till 91. And then it was a force
it's
for
great.
taking your license from you, right? Like, hey, you're slowing down a little bit from that standpoint. But like,
Yeah,
it is all about like how can I improve on the time that I have in my mind, because heck, I could walk out in front, out in the street and get hit by a bus. You never really know. So like as you're looking at all these things, right? Like what are some key components before we get into what you guys are doing at Qualia? What are some key components we can be doing to help drive that marker? Like for me, my wife and I, this is all forced by my wife. She's the health person, and this is me going, okay, I should do this too, right? So like we do
yeah,
function health, and so like my biological age is 8 years younger than I really am, which looks really great. But I'm like, how do I decrease that as I get older, right? So like,
yeah.
what are some key factors you can do before we get into like the main things that Qualia is running right now?
Yeah. So, in general, the whole field is changing. In fact, the term health span itself is relatively new. So back in 2000s, there was only, less than 500 appearances of health span and related terms in the literature. Only a couple of dozen, actually. And then within a few years, now that's skyrocketed and it's become a term that is used widely, not only in academia, but also, from normal people saying, hey, I want to improve my health span. People understand what that term is now. And um, another major advancement that took place in the geroscience space, which is the science dedicated to understanding the mechanisms of aging. So that's different than gerontology, which is the study of older people. So what does it look like as a person is getting older? That's really important as well, but those two are different. And geroscience is really looking at ways to intervene in our physiology, in our biology, so that we can get these outcomes that we want. Now, a really important paper came out in 2013 in the journal Cell, and it became the most cited paper in the last 10 or 15 years. It's got like 20,000 citations, and it was the hallmarks of aging. And what that paper did was look at these reliable characteristics that occur when an organism ages. It was mostly focused on mammals, but it includes all sorts of organisms. And so you see that these things occur like telomere attrition. You might have heard some of these: genomic instability, senescent cell burden. So you have more senescent cells, something that you know about. Um, Stem cell exhaustion. There was originally 9 of them, and then about 10 years later, exactly 10 years later, they published another paper, and then they added 3 more. So there's now considered 12. And what you will see is that each one of these provides an opportunity for us to intervene. It gives us some sort of target that scientists can try to go after and say, okay, what do we know about the nature of this hallmark of aging? And what does it look like? What does that system look like when you're younger? What does it look like when you're older? And then how can we either slow the process of aging, reverse it? All those questions are at play, and it's a really exciting time. So yeah, and I'll say this is that because there's these different hallmarks of aging, of course they interact with each other, and it's nice to think of them in a separate fashion because it helps us take this huge complex system of the body and narrow it down to something that's more manageable for discussion. But the truth is that they are interacting. And so the future is likely not going to be a single pill. It's going to be supplements, exercise, sleep, environmental exposures, getting rid of the good, adding the bad. I'm sorry, getting rid of the bad, adding the good. It's going to be a whole program, and it will be up to individuals to see how much they want to participate in all the different ideas that exist that are out there. I like working in the supplement space. I'm new to it as of July because you can embed all sorts of knowledge into a very easy to consume form factor. Is
Yeah.
it a complete solution? No, but I think it is very helpful. They can be, and they can also be a catalyst for a person to now make consistent behavioral choices. And now you're maybe more likely to stand more and walk more and get your sleep and eat right. And so I see that as this forward momentum building process, and supplements can definitely be a part of that.
Yeah, so supplements are interesting. It's a great segue where I wanted to go next. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
mentioning them. So I didn't have to look
Yeah.
awkward trying to, get there. But with that being said, like supplements are an interesting thing for me, and I think most people because they want to take something and go, okay, I see the result immediately. I feel the release immediately. Whatever the case may be, right? Like they go, oh, I'm in pain. Let me take some Advil or whatever. And no, the pain's gone. Or I need to sleep and I'm going to take this. Oh, I'm sleeping. Like whatever the supplement may be, they want that instant gratification. Most supplements, daily
Yeah.
vitamins, all these things, you don't necessarily, even in the long term, totally feel what it is, right? So to get to one of your products, where you talked about the cells and all these things, and we'll get into zombie cells and the Senolytics, but like Senolytics, it shows me the results immediately. Right.
Mm,
Like I go,
mm,
okay, this is clearly working because my body is reacting. And
yeah.
so it's been very, very easy for me to stay very consistent with Senolytics because I'm going, this is working. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that supplement in general, and then your take on long-term supplement and how can we kind of track the effects it's having on our body.
Yeah. So what you just mentioned is a gift, the ability for your body to actually get feedback on the utility of any strategy that you're taking, because that's not always the case. And you're totally disadvantaged when you're taking something that is having an effect, but only can be perceived with longer term objective data. And against the backdrop of what, N of one, how you're doing against the population of people your age, like you have a limited amount of information that you can draw comparisons from. And sometimes you are not sure if it's working or not. Like, for example, if we're trying to slow the trajectory of aging, how would you really perceive that? Even if there's actually a decline happening, but your decline is 50% less than a person next to you not doing your strategy.
Yeah.
It's the challenge that we face in anything related to health. So, yeah, with that in mind, just wanted to make some comments on that. And in fact, some things I refer to them as the meaningful but invisible. They're having an absolute positive effect on you, but it's invisible because it took 2 or 3 months in order for you to feel it or for the effects to show up. And what happens is you acclimate to the feeling of the improvement, and then you kind of forget where you came from. And that is not due to laziness or anything like that. That is just normal, right? Also, if you have, let's say, like a little bit of a pain or an ache, that is calling your attention. What happens when that ache goes away? You kind of forget about it, right? Your
Yeah.
mind is going to focus on other things. So there's a lot of interesting challenges, psychological, behavioral challenges in the space of health at all, and supplements are also subject to that too. But it is great when you can feel them. So yeah, I'm really glad to hear that you felt senolytic. And to answer your question, what is that?
Every time.
So senescent cells are the nickname for them is zombie cells. And that sounds bad, and they are only in a certain context. So cells will only live a certain amount of cycles and then they die. We used to think that cells would be alive forever in a petri dish, and that Leonard Hayflick in the 1960s realized that that is actually not true. That there's a certain number of cycles, 40 to 60, before they will undergo what's called replicative senescence, and that means that some of the damage is built up enough in a cell and that damage gets passed on to the daughter cells, right? And eventually it makes sense for those cells to just be cleared away. And so that when a cell becomes senescent, it's like half alive and half dead. And
Mm.
when you're young, actually at all times, the cell is releasing all these inflammatory molecules into its surrounding. And that ends up serving as a beacon for your immune system to say, hey, come clear me out. What happens though as we get older and your immune system is not as effective as it was before? Well, you've got this increasing burden of cells becoming senescent, but they're not getting cleared out. So all these inflammatory molecules are getting launched into the surrounding, and that's generally raising the level of inflammation in the body. And we know that to be another characteristic of getting older. And the problem with that is, sometimes we think of, inflammation is bad. Inflammation is actually really important signaling in the body, but you want to have you want that to be in balance. And when the level of rises, that means it's out of balance and it starts to disrupt all sorts of cellular tissue and organismal communication so that your body becomes less healthy at doing its work. So that is what a senescent cell is. And a senolytic means that these are compounds or strategies in the field of xenotherapeutics. So there's lots of different ways you can approach this. How do we clear those cells since our immune system is not doing as well as it was before? And in fact, even some researchers are looking at vaccines as a possibility. So training a vaccine to then target senescent cells directly and to clear them out. That's part of the xenotherapeutic field that's of research that we're looking into. The best research so far has been looking at natural compounds like flavonoids that are targeting these vulnerabilities of those cells and helping them actually die. So your regular cells don't have these upregulated mechanisms like the
Mm.
senescent cells do. And so you can take these high doses of flavonoids, quercetin, fisetin, piperlongumine. This is all ingredients that are in our formula that are targeting slightly different parts of the pathways that are vulnerable, and it causes those cells to actually die, which reduces the inflammatory burden in the body. And it's been an incredibly successful product for the company. And yeah, I do it once a month, and I've been doing it. I've been actually doing this before Qualia came out with their product. I
Oh,
was just
wow.
taking high dose Fisetin since 2017, but once a month, 2 days. And then Qualia came out with their product. I was like, oh, this is a better formulation. It's super easy. Just get it in the mail once a month. Take it. I take mine on a Saturday, Sunday, and then that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually just took mine this week, Tuesday and a Wednesday.
Okay, nice.
We're recording this on Thursday, and so I literally the last 2 days I took them, and I also love that too. Right, 2 days and you're done. Right, it's not
Yeah.
a every single day you have to make sure you swallow these 30 pills in order to push through. Right, it's 6 pills 2 days in a row,
Yeah.
and again you're seeing these results. Now I wanted to go back to these. I'm going to mess it up. Senescent cells.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it.
Look at me. So these senescent cells, are you saying that if we're not clearing them out of our body, they are affecting the strength of the new cells our body is making?
Well, yes, that is a possibility. And that is one thing that we can talk about today. So, our body has this regeneration system in it, and that is stem cells. So, stem cells are, we have these different pools of them throughout the body, and they replaced damaged tissue. So, all sorts of cells in the body have their own lifespan, like blood cells, they only live 3 months, right? And then you have other cells like neurons, and they live much decades. And so there's lots of different time scales for cells to live. But when they do die, they need to be replaced. And that is what stem cells do in our body. But they undergo aging as well. And you can develop something called stem cell exhaustion. And you're right. The increasing burden of inflammation from senescent cells releasing all those inflammatory molecules interferes with the healthful functioning of stem cells. So you can't, when that burden of inflammation rises, your stem cells can't replace these worn out tissues. And now think about, imagine a hypothetical person in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you can see the deterioration, more wrinkles in skin, loss of muscle mass, hunched over spine, loss of musculoskeletal integrity, all sorts of aspects of the body do degrade because the cells that are getting worn out are not getting replaced. And so that's a net loss. And this is a really exciting area because this could be, if we can figure out a way to, well, the many ways that will increasingly be able to manipulate the idea of stem cells to replace our tissues. Hypothetically, we could be 90 years old and feel like 40. That'd be incredible.
Yeah.
So that's the future.
That's the ultimate goal, right? And so I want to talk about stem cells and kind of how you guys have formulated something that is in pill form. Because here's the thing:
Yeah.
you're a couple years ago. So I'll tell you the whole backstory. So when I was a kid, I broke both my hips, which
Mm,
misaligned my spine. My neck curves the wrong way, right? So it curves. I
yeah.
forget if it's supposed to curve backwards, but whatever. So
Yeah.
I now have a pinched disc in my neck, which affects
Mm,
everything down my left side.
mm,
Makes certain things difficult, and so a couple years, and I work through it the best I can.
yeah.
I'm trying not to get into surgery, right? And so a couple years ago, I was offered stem cells to fly down to Costa Rica, and I ultimately didn't go because the promise seemed too great, right? Like they were like, "Oh no, that'll totally cure that. It'll be perfectly fine." I'm like, "This just doesn't make sense to me." And I had a couple of friends, and we could talk offline about who they were, who kind of flew down and did it, and one had amazing results and the other one was like it messed me up, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, cool, I saw both, and I'm like, let me hold back. And now I see Qualia and was able to sample them this month, and we'll continue to use them moving forward. You guys have it in a pill form. Let's talk a little bit about this idea
Yeah.
of stem cell regeneration in a different way versus getting an injection and going through the whole process of having to fly to a different country just because of America's take on stem cells.
Yeah. So I want to do a couple of things here. I'll probably do it in reverse order. But first of all, medical stem cell therapy is how most people think of stem cells. So you get some stem cells extracted. So it's autologous, meaning it comes from self, versus allogenic, which means come from a donor. There are problems when stem cells come from a donor, including immune rejection. Although there are some new types of cells called Muse cells that might not undergo that same degree of immune rejection. So that's another area that's pretty exciting. And these are just cells that we do have in our body. So you can also harvest them from your bone marrow. But the future of maybe getting them manufactured outside of the body, and then you have this fresh pool of these regenerative cells available, that is something that I've got my fingers crossed become something really exploitable by society, and hopefully it won't be ungodly expensive.
Yeah.
But anyway, it usually is at first.
Yes,
It
always.
usually is at first. Yeah. Okay, so that's how most people think of stem cells. You aspirate it from like your bone marrow. You can get them from fat. There's different types of stem cells. So depending on what you want to have improved, you would need to access the right source. So mesenchymal stem cells from fat tissue, or hematopoietic stem cells from bone marrow. And again, you have, like I said, all sorts of different pools in the body. And then you just need to get the right ones. Our product is very different. Our product is saying, we're not going to try to, it's not about extracting stem cells and putting them in a pill. It's about what are the factors that are important for your own stem cells to be healthy and to do their job. And what's interesting is part of stem cell exhaustion, we don't see like a dramatic decline in stem cells. Yes, there is a decline, but in some cases, one weird aspect of aging is that your body's now just sending more stem cells into the body. And so that there's a loss of like appropriate signaling
Mm.
that your body needs in order for the stem cell actually to do its job. And so what our entire founding premise was, okay, so there's a lot of different parts of stem cell function, and I'll even walk through that real quick. So 90% of the time, stem cells are in hibernation. They are in this quiescent state, and they need to be. So they are, and it's part of why we call them forever cells, why they live so long, is because their metabolism is so slow, and they have very, very good protein control mechanisms, both in clearing out broken down proteins and also maintaining the really healthy protein structure. This is why they can live for a very, very long time, which is what we want, because remember, these are our pool of cells to regenerate the tissues that is getting worn out. Okay, so that's one part that you need to, in order for them to do their job, you then need to wake them up. Then they will undergo proliferation. So every stem cell will split into two. One of them is a clone, and the other one is called a progenitor cell. And the progenitor cell is destined to become some type of tissue in the body that has a function. So then the cell needs to migrate. It gets into the bloodstream. It needs to find its way to the place where you need to regenerate some tissue. And then it adheres to the walls. It doesn't wander aimlessly. Like it's listening or sniffing chemical signals. Then it adheres to the vessels near where it needs to go. It migrates into the particular tissue. And at this point, a really good way to think of it is imagine a lump of wet clay. And that clay can be molded into a bowl, a plate, a pot, all different things. And that process of becoming something specific and useful is what we call the process of differentiating. It's differentiating into, let's say, a muscle cell. And what you don't want is to be developing a neuron or a fat cell in your muscle cells. So it is listening to all sorts of signals from the extracellular environment, the environment that it's now localized in, to become what it needs to become. And it's a several week process where the lump of clay becomes the hardened pitcher, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And as you get older, that whole signaling becomes altered in a negative way. So you actually, I'll give you an example. So when we're talking about muscle cells, it's more likely for these stem cells that are in the area to become a muscle cell to now become fibroblasts, which is scar tissue. So increasingly, imagine a 90-year-old person who is stiff, right? And it's hard to move. A lot more of their muscle has been replaced by scar tissue.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so our goal is, how do we then create that environment that is supporting all parts of that process? And the reason it's a 4-day, just kind of like stem cells is or excuse me, our senescent product is 2 days. The stem cell product is 4 days. And that is because, as I was mentioning earlier, you don't want to be triggering stem cell release and proliferation every day, because that's going to contribute to stem cell exhaustion, right? Remember, they have to stay. We want to give it a pulse of regeneration and then go back and let them rest.
Yeah. So when we look at this, obviously people are going, "This sounds amazing." What's the science behind what you guys have created? I mean, I believe when I did some research, there's only something like 15 ingredients in the stem cell. Like,
Yeah.
what was the science behind that, and what kind of results have you seen with people using it going forward?
Yes. So the process, I might even take a moment and tell your audience just how Qualia generally approaches formulation. And I'll use our first product as a little side story. So the first product that we came out with was called Mind. And this is a nootropic. And at the time when this came out, there was a lot of discussion about which nutrient, compound, whatever was going to augment brain performance. And Qualia's approach was to say, okay, well, how do we support the entire system that is thinking so that we are providing precursors for neurotransmitter production? We're dealing with, we're adding compounds that support the creation of energy and that handle oxidative stress and inflammation, that plant compounds that are then having an impact on enzymes that allow for the neurotransmitter to stay active in the synapse longer, which creates this brightness of thought. And so that is fundamentally in the fabric of the company and how we approach things. We try to look at, we call it a systems approach. How do we support the whole system that is doing the thinking versus just, adding a lot of one nutrient and trying to like force it into one particular pathway. So that has been the fabric of everything that we do. And you've seen that in the Senolytic product, right? Because that's multiple ingredients and they're all doing these complementary things to get better results.
Yeah.
Same with stem cell. So yeah, there are 15 ingredients, but you can kind of break them down into different types of categories. So botanical extracts, things that have been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine, superfood or complex natural substances that have, let's say, in a lot of plants, for example, it's not like one plant, one phytochemical. It's like one plant, 5, 10, 15 phytochemicals that come with it. For example, olive oil. There are 50 different polyphenols that are in olive oil that are having effects. So plants are a very rich source of this pharmacopoeia in nature. And that pharmacopoeia is doing really interesting things in our body. And in fact, I think one of the bigger, broader issues here is that even if you have a very good diet, our diet is really limited by the modern food system, right? You're going to be eating broccoli and cucumbers and lettuce and carrots, right? Tomatoes. In hunter-gatherer societies, they would eat up to 30 plants a day
Wow.
and over 700 in a year, according to some estimates of at least local, certain hunter-gatherer tribes. Think about how much phytochemical exposure our hunter-gatherer forebears were receiving and compare that to the exiguously small level of these natural compounds that we're now getting even on a healthy diet.
Yeah.
Conflate that idea with the fact that like, how many people are actually meeting the recommendations for fruit and vegetable intake, right? And you can see the issue. And so it's another great opportunity for supplements. And in this case, we're orienting around a particular goal, but in a very general sense, we're helping provide greater phytonutrient exposure to, by consuming these products. So yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the way that we started then was to screen about 100 different compounds that had some evidence, whether it's preclinical or clinical, on affecting stem cells in some positive way. And then here comes the art of formulation. This is when a group of PhDs that are really well read on the literature after months of studying and reading papers get together in a room and start to think about, okay, how do we create this complementary stack so that we're supporting stem cell protection, stem cell activation and proliferation and differentiation. And a good analogy that I think for this is that because the signal to noise ratio is getting altered with aging because of the inflammation and all the other things that come with getting older, it's like we're speaking louder to a person who is hard of hearing so that they can actually hear the message.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that
Yeah.
analogy. So what type of if we're looking at long-term effects of taking the supplement, what can people begin to see how their body reacts? What are the benefits, long-term, short-term? Like why
Yeah.
should somebody jump in and try this supplement?
Yeah. So generally what do we think is the appropriate usage, I'd say. So it's 4 days a month, but you would take this now every month in perpetuity, right? Because it's not like there is really an end state here. It's
Right.
not like if we put this as an analogy with exercise, it's not like you just need to get a couple of really hard workouts this month and then you're good, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about ongoing support for this system, just like with Senolytic, right? It's not like you clear out all your senescent cells and you need to wait another 30 years and do another burst. Is that we're doing this, imagine pruning in a garden. And every month you got to go out and you got to trim off those, brown leaves, which is then going to help the rest of the plant actually do better. Because the it is true that the senescent cells are still taking resources, even though they're not contributing functionally. Similarly, we think that this regenerative pulse is going to lead to basically more youthful functioning over time. And we do, what I'm really proud of is that we do studies on all of our products in humans before they are come into before they're commercialized. However, we don't stop there. So what we have now is a 4 week trial that we did on the product in almost 30 men and women. So it was evenly split. And then they range between 40 and 70 years old. And this was just a questionnaire. So just assessing how people felt. But there was really good positive signs. And what we'll typically do next is we'll move into then more controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled research on it, which we've done. Like we have two studies like that for our NAD product, but it's sort of like how we approach it. So it's step by step. And the first step is always asking people, how did you feel? And
Yeah.
so in this, we got some great results. Most people answered in terms of their experience is that they felt it was either, excellent or very good. That was their experience. And zero people out of the 30 rated it as poor or very poor, which then suggests, supports the idea that the product is well tolerated, which is important too. And then about 90% of people had interest in purchasing the product, which I think says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the 90% want to buy after going through the test. I mean, that says a whole ton because that means 99 out of 10 of them had that effect of like, oh, I see an improvement in some way, shape, or form. Because I think
Yeah.
that's, again, as going back to the conversation earlier, supplements are difficult because you don't always see the results right away or you don't feel the results right away. And so obviously after doing it for, the 4 months or the 4 weeks, whatever you said, and seeing that improvement that quickly, I think that will obviously help people kind of be like, okay, cool, this is helping me age better, have longevity, feel better in my body, which ultimately that's the key, right? You hit a certain age,
It's key.
it takes a little bit longer to get out of bed, and it takes a little bit longer to get moving in your workouts, and you're not doing as many burpees because God, everybody hates burpees, right? I don't care how fit you are,
Hallelujah.
nobody likes them. And so it's one of those things that like and this is the key, right? Like for me at least, any little tool I can have
Yeah.
that moves the needle 1%, 10%, 20%, whatever the case may be, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. So I want to ask you a question I ask every single person on this podcast, and I'm going to
Yeah.
spin it a little bit differently because the conversation's been a little bit different than a lot that I've had on the show.
Okay.
Um, so I want to ask you, so the question normally is, what is your definition of success? And then what
Mm.
are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself? But I want to put
Mm.
a little bit of skew on that and say, what is your definition of long-term success in your health? And what
Mm.
are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that long-term success for yourself?
Great. Oh, that's a great question. Okay. So I think that the answer for what is long-term success is that you have a process that you are continually working at. that health is not something that ever leaves your consciousness for weeks at a time. It is a part of your daily process of living. And you're mindful around how things make you feel, that you are doing things even if you abandon them at some point because you're like, I'm not sure if that was working or not. By the way, that is very much a part of your health journey. You buy a device and it sits there and you don't really use it that much. That's okay, right? It's not completely linear. It's not mistake free, if you will. But staying engaged, because as I was alluding to earlier, health is not a end state goal, meaning that there isn't a finish line. The finish line, means you've moved on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a process goal. And so you are somebody who is continually upgrading and evolving their process as they move decade to decade. That is success to me. Okay. Now, because imagine this, you have somebody who is extraordinary, like a picture of health. And then you have somebody who is dealing with a lot of health issues, but the two of them have, different health strategies. Like one person doesn't really care. They have a lot of like, natural gifts, if you will. And the other one is dealing with issues, but they're really on top of it. They're getting smarter all the time. They're learning, they're trying. That person is just as successful, even though they're dealing with issues. And in fact, so many people in the health space are trying to solve, or at least their motivation to work in the area came from solving a problem that they faced,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
not a, it's
Give me
not a bad
that
thing.
person all day long. Give me the
Yeah,
person who's been through the hardships all day long.
yeah, yeah. Anybody who like positions themselves in as like, oh yeah, it's always been easy for me. I got everything right. I know all the answers. Find someone new. Find someone new.
Exactly. And what are three things you're doing every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Yeah, well, I think that a a smart mind is an excellent signal of your health, right? Because it's such a sensitive organ to the way that we live, our sleep, physical activity. And so things that I do every day. So I have maintained 10,000 steps a day for 13 years. And
Wow. That's
yeah,
impressive, man. Congratulations. That's
th
crazy.
thanks. And and I've used, I've let tech help me, right? Like I think of, early versions were the Fitbit, right? And I think they're far more than a tracker. I call them performance enhancing devices because they're giving me feedback at, 12, 16 in the afternoon that I've only walked this many steps. And so you have to empower that feedback with value, right? A lot of people, you can't dismiss it like, whatever. You have to be like, no, 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 I care about this. Or let me go walk around a little bit, even if it's within your home. I've gotten 10,000 steps many, many times and never left the house, raining out, just pacing, walking around.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm really proud of. And then something that I've been doing regularly is I do red light exposure daily. And that one's a little bit harder. It's more of a cost burden. But I'm mentioning it because I'm really interested in the science of it. And I think we're just at the precipice of learning all the positive things that it can do for us. And this is not at all tested. But for example, I was talking about earlier how our immune system does decline. And part of that is due to what is called thymic involution. So your thymus gland shrinks. The thymus gland is what produces a lot of your immune cells. And so the idea of getting red light, which is increasing energetics in tissues that are about a couple millimeters in, that you're going to possibly keep that healthier longer, supporting a healthier immune system. So it's really interesting to me, that one. And then I think something that I've done, I created something called Intune training, and it stands for integrative and opportunistic. And the idea is that I'm mixing movement into my day. So when we're off the phone, I'm going to go down and do like 20 push-ups. And then I'm going to do some emails. And then I've got some kettlebells by my desk. And then I'm going to do some lifts. And I'm moving throughout my day. And I know that that's solving a couple of independent problems because we know the scenario of somebody who's really fit, but then sits a lot and then is dealing with consequences. It's not as though a high fitness is going to obliterate all the negative consequences of immobility during the day.
Yeah.
And so from going back to like the brain as being a sensitive marker of your health, you're also stimulating really sharp focus when you keep blood flow going throughout your body. So keep moving throughout your day, go for walks, get light exposure. I have a TED talk called How to Optimize Light for Health. In it, I don't mention red light at all, but light's just a fascinating subject. It's doing a lot for us.
Yeah, because a mutual friend, I know you were on our podcast, Molly Eastman, talking about the importance of the sun when it comes to your sleep and all the things, and how often people don't get enough sun. I
Yeah.
think it's fascinating. Um,
Hmm.
the nice part is because I'm an entrepreneur and I have free will on my schedule, I can get out in the sun whenever I want.
There you
Now, on
go.
the flip side, I live in Pennsylvania and it's been gray for the last week and a half, but still being out in the gray helps that whole thing. And I don't want to go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but I do want to ask you this, right? The idea, and we touched on it briefly in the beginning, the idea of longevity has become more and more popular because of the scientific advancement
Yeah.
over the last however many years. Now, it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast this morning on my walk. It was Rogan. He was talking to a scientist, and they were talking about AI, of course, right? The hot topic. And they talked
Yeah.
about how the last 2 years of AI has increased in its strength or its abilities 100x, right? And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And then the guy goes, that's like taking a car from 2 years ago and it can go 100 times faster now. That's when I went, holy crap! Like the advancement of AI is super insane.
Yeah.
What do you see going forward in longevity? Because I imagine just due to the science and how quickly we're moving through it, you're seeing it move so much quicker. How much quickly can we move into the next phases of what everybody's doing?
So, Justin, that's actually like the most perfect setup because it is AI that is going to be the major factor in driving innovation. So, let me lay out a little bit of the complexity of the space. We know that the clinic, if you will, standardized medicine moves very, very slowly, and that the pace of innovation from happening at labs, even at clinics, even N of one of experimentation is moving faster than our ability to validate and standardize. And so we're going to continually experience this tension between what mainstream medicine has codified into a practice that they feel can be distributed across an entire country. And by the way, I get that tension, right? Like it's too conservative, but they're feeling like, well, we really need to validate this before we recommend it because there's negative consequences to things too. We saw it in stem cells, for example. People that were willy-nilly injecting them into the eye to improve vision were going blind. Like there's problems with this stuff if you move too fast. But with these platforms, like for example, Generation Labs, they're creating more data on an individual than at any time prior to like you could go get that test done right now and you would have more knowledge about yourself than any previous person in history has had on them. And then the question of how do we make sense of it? Because just getting overwhelmed with tons of data is actually not that helpful. But the ability for AI to then look at many different combinations of factors to try to reveal insights that then lead to recommendations about what's working, what to do. That is the future, and it's going to come faster than I think we're ready for. And I'm here for it. I'm super excited about it. But you're going to continue to see that tension of like, yeah, but it's not validated. It's only in a few people, and we're going to have to figure that out because we need to move faster in the validation space.
Yeah, 100%. Last question before we get to the final question and find out how everybody can grab the products. What's your take on this guy who's trying to live forever who has the Netflix special? I'm sure you've seen it. I recently watched it. It's mind blowing.
Brian Johnson.
Yeah, that's his name. Yeah, yeah.
All right. My answer might surprise you. I think Brian Johnson is one of the most interesting people in the space, period. He's a
Interesting.
little weird, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
but he's doing what we were just talking about. He's actually going out there and you can generate so much information just from yourself. Now compare that to standardized, where you're looking at populations, right? Like, does this drug work? Well, that drug, if you look at that, it's crossed like people from 30 to 80. And if you look at a waterfall plot, which is if you chart every individual and their effect, you have the average, right? Like people that are actually at the average of all of these folks. You have people where it's working 5 times more than the average.
Yeah.
And you have people where it's not working at all. And then others where it's actually seems to be interfering with their health. It's actually you're adding an issue. So what is the reality there? The average? No, it's what's happening to you.
Yeah.
And so what Brian Johnson is doing is hyper analysis of his own body, and he's letting us learn from him. And I think there have been people that have tried to be like him in the past, and he's a much better version of it because he's more scientific. And he's the communicator of what's going on, but he has a really good team because he's close to a billionaire and he
Yeah.
can afford it. The only thing I'll say is you don't have to be like him. He's doing so many things, it can add a lot of pressure to an individual who's looking like, God, I'm not doing nearly enough, and it's demotivating me from trying anything. Let him, he's that person that is working at the bleeding edge. Let's learn from him. And I think health optimization is about calibration. Everybody has to calibrate their efforts to something that feels right, to their resources, their time, all of the different pressures they have in their life. If they have big family, like limited time, figure out what feels good to you and do that.
Yeah, that the perfect answer because I think at the end of the day, right? Like I might take a supplement that upsets my stomach every single
Yeah.
day, and somebody else might take and be like, I feel 10 times better, right? Like it's all
Yeah.
about what's working for you and finding out. And same thing with let's go old school health, right? Like diet. Are you carnivore? Or are you vegetarian? Are you this or are
Yeah.
you that? Like everybody kind of has their lane to stay in. And that's the frustrating and interesting part of health and longevity and everything because it is a little bit different for every single person. But I end every single episode with the same question. I'm interested to see what you say. But before I get there, how can people
Mm.
grab a hold of this product? What's all the good information?
Yes. So come to qualialife.com. You can find all of our products there. We also do a lot in education. Like the company, it makes physical products, but we also do a lot of education. So, for example, I talked really high level about the product, but you can go find entire really well written blogs on let's say like astragalus, which is one of the ingredients that's in the stem cell formulation, and you can learn just about that. And so follow us there for both learning more and understanding more, and then also to come grab some of the products. Like they're on subscription, which is great because like we're talking about, like I know that I do Senolytic the first weekend of every month. I get it before, it's there, I take it, I don't have to worry about it again. And then I wait 2 days and then I take stem cell, right? Clear out the inflammation. Now do your regenerative burst. And that combo, by the way, I mean, it could be one product. It's so in sync.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're separated. They're obviously two different products, but like you get better results when you do that 1-2 punch. So yeah, that's what I'll say about qualitylife.com.
Well, so and actually, guys, if you use the code growth now, you get 15% off any of the products that they have on that website. So make sure you go check that out, qualitylife.com. I believe you can even go to /growth now, which will embed the code. And so I don't know how it works. I'm not a website guy.
Yeah.
But Dan, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called the Growth Now Movement, this is a personal question for you. But in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Well, I think a lot of growth, kind of like it's almost like a diamond coming out of coal, like under a lot of pressure. So I remember early in like the 2010s, I left a job in medical affairs at a pharmaceutical company to do my PhD, and I was the executive chairperson of an industry organization at that time, and I started a startup. So I was like, I've got these three different things: a PhD, this responsibility to this group of a couple hundred people in the industry, and I remember saying to myself, I'm like, well, if I can't do anything right, if I'm overwhelmed and I'm not doing things to the degree of quality that I want, then I'll let some of it go. And so I did. I let go of the industry thing that I was working in. It no longer made sense. It made sense for other people to lead that. And then over the next, 5 or 6 years working on my PhD in the startup, I was I really had to figure out what actually led to my improved productivity. And I tried things that didn't work, right? You usually only try things that you believe in to some degree. You're like, yeah, that sounds really good. I'm going to try it. And
Yeah.
so some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. But so much what I realized is that I had to take care of me in order to be my best. I had to get good sleep. I had to stay well hydrated. I had to move throughout the day. I had to eat right. And then, and I sort of created all sorts of strategies around that. And then I felt like I was in a flow state more. So that was a really big period of growth because I was challenged so much that reality couldn't be masked by, just perception. Like, oh, I think this is work. Maybe it's working or not. If it wasn't working, I had to abandon it and do something that did.
Yeah.
So I think that was like one of the biggest periods of growth for me.
I love it. Dan, thank you so much, man, for coming on and sharing your wisdom with my audience. This has been absolutely amazing. I appreciate you.
It was great to chat, Justin. Thank you for having me on.